Kane here. In this video, I would like to start introducing the details of how you achieve some of the things that were shown in the feature overview. So we'll start with a simple case, which is just two pictures on a spread, and the spread being two facing pages of a book, like the books that I'm making of my photographs during my life. So the first thing about pages is that they have margins. So if we select, and as I said in the feature overview, you can set the margins for your pages. So how do you do that? Well, first you have to select an object to define what spread you're dealing with. Then you can go to the scripts panel over here where you have my 28 scripts, all of whom have names starting with IDL so that they will all show up together in the off chance that you might have other scripts sitting around here at the same time. So we have several things about margins here. We have margin presets, which you can delete, export, import. We have margins to clear for the spread. We have margins to set for the document and margins to set for the spread. So let's talk about setting. If you set the margins for the document, then obviously these margin settings apply to everywhere, except if you have set margins to a spread separately, that will override the margins that were set for the document. So that's why you have the option to be able to clear the margins from the spread at the spread level so that that would revert to the document level. So if we want to set the document margins, or the margins for this spread here, let's do it for the spread so we don't disturb the document. And so we double click to activate a script. So we double click here and we get a user interface, which is very simple. It defines the pica distances of the margins from the edges of the space. The edge in the middle being halfway across because we're doing two facing pages. Okay, so these are all in picas, which is the underlying dimension of distance in InDesign. I programmed this so that you can get symmetric margins easily, because if you say that the margins on the right-hand page should be both 0, then you will get a symmetric set so that they will be the right margin of the left page will match the left margin of the right page, and vice versa. The right margin of the right page will match the left margin of the left page. Okay, so if you like this and you want to define a preset, you can put a name down here, and that will be the name of a preset. If there are presets, you will get up here a drop-down list of those presets, and from which you can choose one, and the boxes will be filled in accordingly. So let's just say OK to illustrate what happens. So if we say OK, the first thing that happens is we get a demonstration of the preset setting for the left page. And so this is a box, a selection thing that's put in here temporarily by my script and taken away, so it does not add to the burden of your document. And it says, do you like this? If you like this, click OK. Remember, I showed you in the feature overview that you get these approval things all the time. So if we say OK for this, then we get the margins for the right page. And if we say OK for this, now we have margins on the two pages defined, and we can proceed arranging documents. So let's say that we want to put this, now that we got margins, let's say we want to put the picture here of the doorway up in the corner. So we got this doorway picture selected. Well, first of all, if we're going to relate the picture of the inside down here to the picture of the doorway to make a pleasing arrangement of these two, these are kind of randomly placed here like they might be as the result of importing or placing these images into your InDesign document. Okay, so we need to name them, and so we have in the scripts we have a script down here called set identifier, which is down here. So if I double click on that, then I get a box where I can type in a name for this. So this is the doorway. So let's type in here doorway. So we don't get confused at all. We know exactly what we're dealing with. So we put in doorway and hit enter, and then we've got this name doorway. So then we can click on this one, and we can double click here, and we can name this in, let's say, just inside, because that's shorter typing. But that's descriptive of what we have here. So we do that. Now each one of these has a name, and that allows us to possibly talk about the relationship between them above and beyond the limitations of InDesign, in which you can only talk about one object at a time. Let's say we want to put the doorway picture in the upper left corner of the page. How do we do that? Well, there's a script here called Move to Corner. So if we double click on Move to Corner, it says, where do you want it? You got positions 1 through 9. That corresponds to, think about the numeric keypad, and the positions of the keys in the numeric keypad correspond to the positions of the 4 corners, the 4 sides, and the center of the space defined by the page margins. So if I want this in the upper right corner, I put in the number which is in the upper right corner of the keypad, and that's number 9. So I put in 9 here, and I just say OK, which I can do by hitting enter. And I've got something which it thinks is a parameter, so we'll cancel that, and we get out of InDesign. So we come back in InDesign. I don't know why that happens, because I come out of these things all coherently, and sometimes that doesn't work. Okay, so we're still trying to move this to the corner. Double click here. That didn't work, so we'll double click here. We'll put in 9 again, and be careful not to type anything else. Say OK, and you see it moved to the corner. You probably don't remember exactly where the corner was, but it was obviously up in here, because it's sort of short of halfway across. And so we have, again, like we had in the feature overview, the question about accepting this. So we'll just accept this and say OK. Now let's put the interior picture up here next to that to make some kind of relationship among these two pictures. So if we click on this picture and select it, then the big deal script, which allows you to do arbitrary relationships with great flexibility, is the one which is called IDL relationships set for an item. So this is setting something for an item. If I double click this, I get this big user interface dialog, which you saw briefly in the feature overview. We have the 4 parts that I talked about then. We have the option to load a preset. We have the option to talk about the location of the object which is selected, which in this case is the interior of the cabin. We have a section to talk about how big we want this to appear eventually, and we have at the bottom the option to enter a name of a preset into the box down here, and that would, if we do accept what the arrangement came out to be, that preset will be defined. If we decline the option by hitting cancel when we get that approval, then of course nothing gets defined because we didn't like what we did. Okay, so let's move this over so you can see what's going on a little bit. So we want to take this and make it relate to the doorway. So we want the location to be different. It's not unchanged, so we'll look at the drop-down list. We can base it on the page margins, which would put it, for example, in the corner or on an edge or in the center. Or we can base it on the margins of some item, and we'll not do the last 2 right now. So the question is, what's the item? So here it says, what's the name of the item? So you have to put in the name of the item. So you get a drop-down list which contains the names of the items that are in this spread that have names, excluding the thing that you are dealing with, that you have selected, because it makes no sense to talk about where you're located in relation to your present location. That doesn't mean anything. That means don't move me. Okay, so we picked the doorway here, and then what part of this object is going to relate to what part of the doorway? So what's the options? Well, we have the four sides, the four corners, and the center of the rectangle, which is defining this image. We want, let's put the upper right corner of this next to the upper left corner of that. So we'll click upper right corner here will be next to the what? Upper left corner. Upper left corner of this first item. And if we just leave everything alone and say OK back here and say OK, then it moves up there and it's sitting next to it. And we get a confusing arrangement because the pictures run together, which is not cool. Okay, so what can we do about that? Well, we select this again. We go back to setting the relationships for the item, and we can have an offset. So we can make this move around in relation to, remember, we've matched these corners, and we can move it around by a fixed amount is one option. I won't do the others right now. And you can move it as you want. And the directions are like graph paper in school, where you learn that in the X direction, horizontally, you positive goes to the right, numbers increase as they go to the right, and in the Y direction vertically, numbers increase as you go up. So it tells you that in the text here. So if we want to move this to the left to get it away from the door, we have to put a negative number into this horizontal offset. So let's go in here and put in, let's say, minus 15 and see what we get. So if we do this and go there, then it moves back to the left, and that looks good. So we'll say OK. Now let's make it. Now you see if I unclick that, you see that we have less confusion about because the images are clearly separated, which was our goal of moving that over that way. Now if we double click or click on this again and set the relationship, we can also affect the size. So we can say, how big is this going to be? Well, we can talk about its height or width or height. And the third option we won't talk about in this first introductory version, but we want to base the height on something. We want the height of this to match the height of the doorway picture. Okay, so how do we do that? Well, this is talking about page margins, and so we don't want that. So we can just talk about the first item named above. Okay, and if we say that it's 100% of that size, then it will match up. And so we just say OK, and there we have the 100% size, and we have the two images next to each other. Remember from the feature overview that we can also make snapshots of what's going on. So let's show how that works in detail. So we have scripts down here about snapshots, 3 of them. One is delete snapshots. One of them is reverting to a snapshot, returning back to one, and one of them is saving the current configuration as a snapshot. When you do this, the snapshot saves not only the arrangement of the items on the page, but also all the relationship definitions that you have made by using these scripts, so that you come back exactly to where you are here, even if you've gone off and changed other relationships and making other snapshots and making other routes along your project. So if we double click on the snapshot to save, we didn't select an object, so we have not defined the spread we're dealing with. So select any object. Now we can go here and say save a snapshot, and we can just call this snap 1, for example, and then we say OK, and we've got snap 1. Okay, now that's to illustrate what we can do. Let's say we take this and we now go to relationship set for an item, for this item. So here we got relationship set for an item, and you notice that because we put it in the corner and we said it was in the corner, then when it comes in this general way, it is already telling you that the new location is based on the page margins, and the upper right corner will be there. Okay, what happens if we now say the lower right corner, and that will move it down to the bottom of the page, and don't change the item. Well, okay, let's change the size of the item. Let's base it on Let's change the width based on the page margins. Let's make it, let's say, 20%, just to illustrate something that would make a dramatic difference. And if we now say OK, which we can also do by hitting Enter, the pictures got small. The pictures moved to the corner. You'll notice it happened basically instantaneously. And they all match up. And we just say OK. And now we have a new arrangement of our spread. If we click on one of these and come down to saving a snapshot, we can say here, save a snapshot. And we can just call this Snap 2, like so. Enter. And now we can revert to the snapshot by clicking on Revert To, and we get a list of the options. We have the start, which was the place this all began. So let's just illustrate this. So here's where we started from, and then we can click on Revert To. We can go to Snap 1, which was up in the upper corner with the bigger versions. We can go here, click on the Snap 2, and which is going to give us the lower version with the smaller images. So this video has illustrated several things of general interest and general basic stuff. First, you can name the objects in your spread, and the names of the objects in the spread are interpreted relative to the spread. So you can have the several different pictures on different spreads all named doorway, and there's no confusion. There will be confusion if you move one of those objects into another spread where there's another doorway. Don't do that, or keep your wits about you when you're doing it. Rename it or do something so that it's going to work out right for you. Okay, so one of the things you can do is name these. The second thing you can do is define the margins. The third thing we've shown you here is how to put something into the corner using the arrangement of the keys in the numeric keypad. The fourth thing I've shown you is how to relate one object to another in terms of location and size, and how you can offset the one from the other. And then finally I've shown you how you can make snapshots and revert to snapshots quite easily. So that allows you to be creative, make layouts, make snapshots of them, go to your art director or your spouse or significant other, whoever is going to make some decisions about choices, and you can quickly show all the choices and let a decision get made and then move on with your project and your life. Remember that all the details are handled in these scripts and you don't have to think about them. You may notice over here on the right that I have defined keyboard shortcuts for a lot of these scripts because I use them frequently in my work, and in the PDF write-up that you get with either the trial version or the full version, same write-up, there are hints about, suggestions about the keyboard shortcuts that I have set up for my convenience and might be good for your convenience. So go to the website that is showing now in the lower right corner of your screen, which will tell you where you can get access to the write-up, the scripts, the trial version. Try the trial version, play with it, save some things, save some snapshots, whatever you want to do, and all of the information will be in the document as you have worked on it, but you can't see the results except temporarily, because whenever you ask for new results to be shown, it will show them to you, but as soon as you either approve or disapprove, you're bounced back to where you started from that. But the information is all saved there, so that if you do like this whole thing and go purchase the final version, then you can easily go back, select an object, ask for the recalculation by just doing the parameter set for an object and saying OK, and it will recompute and you will get your spread set up. So thank you for listening, and happy creativity, and be pleased that the details are hidden from you, taken care of by my scripts.